is it different for Muslims in America?
I had a friend from Toledo actually, and but I mean, there's just talking to her, she didn't really, I mean, I think she identified as just being American.
I was just gonna say, like, my school was mostly like Catholic or Christian, and I think in the States it's a little bit harder for Muslims, like, just because it is more obvious and they're more of a rarity, I suppose. So, like, I know that there was a Muslim girl in my high school, and a lot of people, like, don't know about the religion as much as the other ones, so they would kind of, like, make fun of her and stuff like that, and it was really hard for her. So I think it can be hard for different religions in the States. Like, I think there still can be some prejudice.
Is it uncool?
There's
to be
probably
religious?
a variety in this group, yeah.
I'm really curious. What do you guys think?
I'd say at times there are. I think, like, recently, since we're banning, like, putting God in, like, the Pledge of Allegiance and stuff, I'd say, like, times like that, it's harder, and, like, not to pray in school. Like, there's different bannings that have been happening recently, I've seen. Sometimes it's hard to talk about with people.
I don't know, it kind of puts things in context, right, about all the horrors that we saw with National Socialism, with the concentration camps in the 1930s and 40s. I don't know, what do people think? This actually happened when you guys were alive.
It's just strange to think that we were actually alive while this was going on. It's crazy that we were learning about the Holocaust and we can't really put it into context because we weren't alive during that time period. But to know that we were in elementary school, you know, learning how to write cursive while this was going on, it's strange to think about, I guess.
So that there's a skew in how we learn history, that we only see what we want to see.
It's a huge skew.
Yeah.
I mean, even the fact that 95% of our textbooks are printed and written and printed in Texas, you know.
That's a different story, yeah.
Just, I mean, I feel like a lot of times the government really follows the whole ignorance is bliss thing, and let's keep our people happy by keeping them unaware of what's going on.
Can I just note, too, that because I was slightly older than you are now, in 1995, this was on the front page of the newspapers. This was on the TV. Everyone who was following it figured this was going to happen, knew this was happening, followed it if they watched the news, if they paid any attention to radio, television, etc. And yet, how many of us still would think that our families have never heard of it, even though it was the biggest news item at the time, right? There's a lot of selective listening and a lot of selective hearing that goes on in the way that we digest news. This was not a surprise to the people of the United States that this happened. I mean, part of me is optimistic, right? That if we learn from the experience of the Holocaust, if we learn from the experience of Srebrenica, we'll become better able to identify similar threats now and possibly do something to stop it. So in some ways, the first challenge is to care, you know, to pay attention to things like the media.
We're all human beings, and and it says people are weak, and that is the reason why there is this rule, because people are like that. I mean, even today, and back in '95, we have all the possibilities to stop war, but we didn't do it because, or someone did not do it because it wasn't in his interest. So
yeah, and people just didn't care enough.
Right.
That's honestly, for every German who did read the newspapers was ashamed and did want to do something. Every French person, the majority of people who did care, They did want to do something. The majority of Americans who paid attention did want to do the right thing.
I just think you're also highlighting our inability to listen. We just can't, we can't hear. We've talked a lot about propaganda in this class, and I think propaganda's power is in that we can't hold multiple perspectives at the same time. I think we're trained to easily see like one sign, this is about grapefruit, and not see, like what's on the other side. We're not trained to see multiple things at one time. So the more we can see deeply and richly, then the media isn't some other thing. It's the thing, that we can read and decide whether we want to believe it or not, and, call movies different things. And we have so much more power than if we just see, like adults, what's on the label.
Yeah, and the thing, about not caring, when we went to see the Congress Hall, the Congress Hall, in that group of students that was there, they didn't really care. And I think that's why everybody strives for this unrealistic goal of world peace. There's never going to, I don't mean to be pessimistic, but there's never going to be world peace because every generation that passes, it seems to be less, they care less about what happened with Hitler, with this, and the less we care, the less we learn about it. So, we want to learn from our past and we want to learn from previous wars, but we've been having wars since the world started. So
it kind of starts over with each generation.
Yeah,
Each generation has to learn.
Yeah. They have to just learn for themselves. It has to be a personal experience. Just like this trip, I was telling Katie, I would have never been as affected by most of this if I just read it in a textbook. But since I'm here, I walked through that camp, I was more affected.
I think that, media, right now, we have Facebook, we have textbooks, we have TV, and I think we're desensitized to it all. Like you were saying, we're on this trip and half of this stuff wouldn't have affected me as much if I had just read it in a textbook. I think I've been like, oh yeah, I've heard this before, I've heard about the Holocaust before, I'm completely desensitized to it. I think that's a really big thing. So yes, the media is what points us in the right direction to care, but it's also, we're so overwhelmed with a lot of media that we just kind of let it go over our heads.
Yeah, and even beyond a textbook, it's you see these kinds of things, they've been boiled down to Facebook groups, oh, a genocide, yeah, I'll join. Sure,
yeah,
more,
like this,
it's hugely desensitized to a lot of these things.